Okay, I'm back and I'm going to review the episodes of Series 7. As I said in the last video, we want to see my thoughts on Mechocracy, which will be at the end of this video, I assure you. Then just skip forward to the last 5 minutes of the end. But I'm just going to briefly run through the episodes of all 8 episodes of Series 7, give you my thoughts. So, episode 1 is Tika to Ride. This is a pun, obviously, on Ticket to Ride, because this, I guess, this episode is partly set in the 1960s. So it's Beatles, the 60s. Even though the Beatles are never actually mentioned in the episode, this, of course, the hot thing, I guess, at the time in science fiction was. It was the era of the X-Files, so there was a lot of stuff about Kennedy and, linking Kennedy into science fiction stories somehow, and coming up with conspiracy theories about who really shot Kennedy. And so this was the chance for Doug Naylor to have a go at writing an episode. The time drive, the time drive that they acquire at the end of at the end of Series 6. The time drive where they explicitly stated, for quite a good joke, that they can move in time but not in space. So they go back to 1421, but they don't realise that they can't get back to Earth. So they breathe in the heady medieval atmosphere of pre-Renaissance deep space. Can suddenly all of a sudden take them back to Earth. Now this begs the question: why doesn't this wrap up the series if they're so all of a sudden able to travel back to Earth? Because they're still using the time drive in Series 10. They went back to the time of Christ there. Why don't they just pick a period? Well, why doesn't Lister just travel back in time to his own era, the era he'd like to travel through, or even travel back to a time and stop himself from getting on Red Dwarf, as he did in Time Slides. This is never actually addressed now. It's like the characters are almost accepted now. This is their life. This is where they live. So it's kind of glanced over all of a sudden. It's kind of briefly explained away, I guess, with the time dilation thing, that the time drive isn't now able to travel in space. But it's really there just as a way now to create better new stories. There is a kind of logic hole in the series now from this point onwards. Just as a cut, right, I'm just going to mention this briefly. Okay, I was trying to think of it if there was anything that I was forgot to mention in the last series. This episode I kind of liked, and it kind of put my mind at rest that maybe Series 7 will be in safe hands with just Doug Naylor penning the series. What worried me that it wasn't is that after Better Than Life, in between Series 6 and 7, Rob Grant and Doug Naylor penned solo Red Dwarf novels that were both a sequel to Better Than Life. Now, Rob Grant, whether this was a conscientious decision on his part, his book wasn't published after the broadcast of Series 7. But I even then, I do have to say, I read both novels and I much preferred Rob Grant's episode. I would have been, let's be honest, I would have been more happy if Doug Naylor had left the writing partnership and Rob Grant had carried on. But then we wouldn't have. He would have lost something if Rob Grant had left the writing partnership as well. Definitely. I really. It's my least favourite of the novels is Last Human. I will do proper reviews because I do really like the novels, but Last Human is easily my least favourite, and in fact I'd even go far as to say I didn't like the novel when I first read it. I found it too dark and depressing. After the accomplishment that was the Better Than Life novel, it was a cause of really serious concern for me finding out that Doug Naylor was going to be the sole penman on the episode. My fears were allayed slightly with Tika to Ride, which was he's obviously, I mean, he's never published a novel since Doug Naylor. Rob Grant has published 3, so he's obviously a TV writer. He wasn't really adept at novel writing, I don't think. But I just wanted to address that. So yeah, this is the episode where the boys travel back to Dallas in '63. They end up accidentally thwarting Lee Harvey Oswald, who it was the first gunman, at least in their version of history. The resolution to the episode is that Kennedy essentially ends up becoming the gunman on the grassy knoll, the second gunman. There's a very, very funny scene where they accidentally kill Oswald with them pulling him out the window accidentally on a wire, which doesn't get cited as much as one of the great scenes, which is always bizarre to me because I think it's a hilarious scene. The resolution to the episode, it's kind of weird, and it gets a bit thin on laughs towards the end. There are some really funny moments. There's a really funny cannibal scene in the episode as well. The 35-minute episode works a lot better as well because there's a funny denouement of Rimmer jettisoning Lister off into space with all his curry that he's acquired. It's an okay episode. Stoke Me a Clipper is the third return of Ace Rimmer. Pretty. It's an alright episode, but it's really a fan service episode, and this sort of signified the start of the trend of Doug Naylor recycling old ideas, really, and presenting them as new plots. There's nothing much here that's new idea-wise, other than Ace Rimmer turning back up and then him revealing that essentially he was. It's kind of the Dread Pirate Roberts scenario of he's not the original Ace Rimmer. He's really a hard-like hologram who took over from the previous Ace Rimmer, and then it turns out towards the end he turns up in the Dwarfist dimension and tells Rimmer that he's got to go off and become the new Ace Rimmer, because they all start out as weasels and they grow from there. And then it ends with the Ace that's turned up dying, and then they create a body and they shoot it through a wormhole to another dimension where all the little coffins, for God's sake, get out, turn up, and it creates a sort of ring like you would find around Saturn. It's quite a beautiful scene, and again, it would be something that looked really good in a science fiction film, like the end of a Star Trek film. But like Tika to Ride, it's just not especially funny. It's also caused some confusion continuity-wise with who is the Rimmer from Back to Earth onwards. Is he the Rimmer that left to become the new Ace, or is he the Rimmer that died in the resurrected Rimmer from Series 8 who died? Because he seems to have memories of things that happened in both Series 8 and prior to Series 8. So how can he be both Rimmers, and why is it never been addressed? Could be the parallel universe theory again. I guess that could explain everything. Back to Earth onwards is another parallel universe. Okay, let's go with that. So So Ace Rimmer turns up, and it's really an excuse to write Chris Barry out of the series. At least that's the excuse why he's not there on the ship. He appears in a flashback to the dwarf in episode 3, Ouroboros, which is the introduction to Kachansky. She's not the original Kachansky. She's a Kachansky that from another dimension who ends up in ours through a dimension rift and can't get back to her own reality. Pretty funny episode. I think there's lots of good business with Craig Charles, who really, I mean, from this point on, he became Lister's always been the central character, really. I know that Chris Barry's always got top billing over him, but I've always seen Lister as the main character and everybody else being support, really. But he really becomes the main character from this point on, and there's lots of funny business with him and dental floss and and I have to say that the introduction of Kachansky, it did give new dynamics to the character. Right, so you can't have the Rimmer Lister dynamic from this point on of two people who absolutely hate each other, but I think secretly deep down kind of like each other as well, bickering throughout space. But replacing that is Lister's unrequited love for Kachansky, and bringing Kachansky in, you also had a new angle for Crichton to explore, which was jealousy. You know, he becomes jealous of Kachansky, and and that gave Robert Llewellyn something new, a new angle to work with. You know, Crichton's jealousy was kind of fun. He's jealous of Kachansky because up until that point he was the one who'd been taking care of Lister all the time, and now he's basically got a rival for Lister's affections. Episode 4 is Duck Soup. Duck Soup was famously written in 4 days by Doug Naylor, out of necessity. They wanted to shoot another episode, which you can actually find a storyboarded version of this episode, which was narrated by, in much the same way as the Body Snatcher missing episodes were narrated by Chris Barry. This one is, and this was going to be the cat episode. I don't understand why, but the cat's been really hard done by when it comes to cat-centric episodes in the series. He didn't have one until the last episode of Series 7, Can of Worms. If you think about it, that's the only cat-centric episode in existence. You know, everyone else has had a character-centric episode. Lister has had many character-centric episodes. Rimmer's had many character-centric episodes. Crichton has had many character-centric episodes. Cat was going to have a character-centric episode, and if you want to see what it was essentially about him finding out he needed to lose his virginity or he's going to die, and this would also have tied up the plot point from series 1 about what happened to the arc of cats that left Red Dwarf. It would have involved them catching up with them. The actual original script, I forget who wrote it, but it did. It wasn't. It was only the first draft that they go off on here, and it wasn't a Doug Naylor penned episode, so it wasn't a very strong episode joke-wise at this point. There's kind of a lot of nonsensical jokes in the episode, but it's interesting to see what might have been, just in case. But essentially, this episode never got filmed because they ran out of money. They couldn't afford to shoot the episode, and it would have needed rewrites to incorporate Kachansky into it. So that episode was jettisoned, and in its place was Duck Soup, which was essentially just another character building episode in the vein of marooned. Something very cheap that they could do. The crew are on a collision course with a sun, and they need to clamber through the ducts and on to get to the engine room to sort the problem out. And in the course of the episode, you get various character revelations and stories about actually, and this is another one where they excised a lot of the best stuff from the series, because there's in the extended version there's a really funny story about Lister being at boarding school and Squeaky Gibson having the squeaky because his bed springs were always squeaking in the night, and then one night they found him it was because he was having an epileptic fit. Really funny moment, but it was excised for time, sadly. It's when it was written in 4 days. It's your respect for the episode is heightened, but you shouldn't really have to know something like that to fully appreciate an episode. It's okay, but it's no classic. Marooned it ain't, Episode 5 is Blue. Original episode title is Heartache. That was something that I think I mentioned it before when I got the fanzine, which is also called Better Than Life, because that was my only source of information pre-internet on the new series. The excitement at when they finally revealed the episode titles, some of which two of which were actually different from the ones. They revealed the episode titles and the episode writers of the series as well. Stoke Mere Clippers' original title was Natural Born Rimmers, and Blue's original title was Heartache, which I kind of actually prefer as a title. I wish they hadn't changed it. But Blue involves Lister thinking he misses Rimmer, and this is the one where you get a couple of flashbacks of Rimmer, so they're able to incorporate Chris Barry in, and there's a couple of really, really funny standout scenes in this episode. One being Rimmer coming back, Lister and Rimmer falling into each other's arms because they missed each other so much, and then them kissing. And Lister wakes up and it's all a dream, of course. And the other standout is the final 5 minutes. It's a really strong, memorable final 5 minutes where you see that they go into the total immersion video game that they used for the Gunmen of the Apocalypse in Series 6. But Crichton has reformatted it with entries from Rimmer's diary. And so you get to see Rimmer's version of events played out with the cast, with Rimmer being the big hero and the rest of the cast being cowards, basically. And then it ends, of course, on the Rimmer Munchkin song, which is a song sung entirely by a load of Rimmers with just animatronic bodies going like that underneath and dancing to the music. Arnold, Arnold, Arnold Rimmer. It's it's one of the classic Red Dwarf moments. So a stronger episode, and I think this is a genuinely funny episode. I think of all the guest writers, Kim Fuller was probably the strongest guest writer they had on the series, on Series 7. So it benefited from his skill as a writer as well. Episode 6 is Beyond a Joke, which, as I mentioned previously, is the one that's written by Robert Llewellyn. Robert Llewellyn, I mean, he is a writer. He's written some quite good books, actually, comic novels, and he's written a couple of quite good memoirs, one called Thin He Was in Filthy Head, about when he was a young hippie, and one called The Man in the Rubber Mask, which is his memoirs of filming series 3 to 5, I believe, or 3 to 6. However, if I'm honest, I don't think it's a really good episode. I like the first 5 minutes, which is of them again going into the AR machine. But this time they go to Jane Austen world, and Crichton gets annoyed. This is basically about Crichton having a breakdown. He gets annoyed and turns up in Jane Austen world with a tank and blows up the gazebo where they're all having afternoon tea and cucumber sandwiches. Pretty funny sequence. I wish that had been the plot of the whole episode, you know. And I know that Gunman was the strongest episode of Series 6, and maybe Doug Naylor didn't want to hand over what was potentially going to be the strongest episode of series, or the strongest concept of the Series 7 to a different writer. So I'm sad in a way that he didn't, because it's obviously when you watch it, it's like, oh, you know, this obviously screams out to be the whole episode, and they do go back to Jane Austen world at the end. But the main bulk of the story, which isn't as interesting as them being in Jane Austen world or Pride and Prejudice world, is been a list. Crichton essentially finding his brother and him being a junkie. There's a few funny moments. Crichton getting so annoyed that his head blows up. There's a cameo appearance from Don Henderson, the famous actor, as a mechanoid. Sadly, I think Don Henderson was dying of throat cancer at the time, so his lines are kind of unintelligible. And there's a reappearance of the Gels in this. Yeah, there's some good. I think there's a strong first half, but like a lot of the episodes in this series, it kind of peters out towards the end when they go for the pathos, sadly. Kind of the main story is kind of forgettable, but but the Jane Austen sections are a lot of fun. I wish it had been the whole episode. You know, I think that they could have had more fun with the dynamic of Jane Austen and corsets and bonnets and machine guns and tanks, you know, coming together. It could have been Pride and Prejudice and Zombies before Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Episode 7 is Epidime. This is a quite a strong episode. One I quite like, actually, possibly my favourite of the series. Just replete with really great moments and great gags. It was. I believe this was actually Paul Alexander's idea for an episode, not actually Doug Naylor's. He had the idea of one of the characters contracting a virus and talking to the virus and trying to plead for his life. And this was all based on actually a Jasper Carrot monologue that he'd written for Jasper Carrot, in which he pleads with his illness to leave him alone. So that's where the original idea for the episode came along. There's lots of great moments in this, you know. I like Lister when he falls down and you think he's in pain, but really he's just got a gob of ice water down his spine, which is something that everyone can relate to. They find an old a block of ice with essentially a woman who's died of the epidemic virus in it, and but she comes back for a few minutes before the moments of death to pass on the virus to Lister, essentially by snogging him. So you have a very funny snogging scene with Lister and a zombie, and there's lots of good moments of him thinking that Kachansky, because the zombie woman gets into bed with him, but Lister thinks it's Kachansky, and then the real Kachansky turns up and he thinks obviously that she's trying to get off with him, and then Crichton turns up, so he has to hide Kachansky, and it's sort of French farce stuff, but really good, really funny. The guy that they get to play Epidime, he was kind of a voiceover cartoon guy. He's a little irritating if I'm honest, but yeah, it's a pretty strong episode. Oh yeah, and it ends with Lister sawing his arm off, and I guess another cliffhanger, because the Lister losing his arm really leads into the central plot of Nanarchy. And there's a lot of fun humour to play with there. You know, a lot of shock humour of people excising limbs, what have you. So yeah, I like Nanarchy. Sorry, Epidyme. Nanarchy is episode 8, and this is the resolution to what happened to Red Dwarf. The first half of the episode is Lister trying to cope with the fact that he's lost his arm, and lots of very funny scenes there of Crichton building him a prosthetic arm. And then they hatch onto the idea of using nanotechnology, which I guess, you know, Doug Naylor had been reading his science journals for plot ideas, and nanotechnology was a new thing at the time. And he thought, oh, how can we utilise this? And then it transpires towards the end of the episode, after they've rebuilt Lister's arm, but giving him a new body, a sort of bulked up steroid body. It sort of ends with him looking at it in the mirror going, ah, but I think if any bloke sort of ended up with like that, you know, I think, great, you know, you can lay off the roids and it'll go down a bit, I'm sure. But yeah, in the course of this episode, you get the crew discover that Red Dwarf had been actually stolen by Crichton's nanobots, and the vapor trail that they've been following was actually on board Starboard the whole time in Lister's dirty laundry, because they'd actually shrunk down the Red Dwarf to sort of atomic size, and it had been going around Lister's underwear for the last 200 years, because that's how nanotechnology works apparently. And so the episode ends with them rebuilding Red Dwarf. This of course has the reappearance for the first time since series 2 Norman Lovitz as Holly. Fun to see him back, although I think he'd be the first to admit he's never really been as strong or as confident in the role as he was in the first couple of series. You know, his one-liners don't really land as well in this, but you know, it's fun to see him back. It'll be interesting to see him in Skipper. Yes, he is in Skipper. I'm starting to doubt now whether Skipper will feature Ace Rimmer or not. I'm not sure, but I know I have seen Norman Lovett's image as a reveal, so I know at least he's in it. I suspect this is going to be the one where they return to the parallel universe of series 1 and 2. So yeah, that's my thoughts on series 7. It's I'd say, you know, it's not bad. It's kind of on a par with series 1. But and I won't say it was part of a downward trend, because you know, there have been series actually after this that I've liked more, but it's series 1 to 6 is and series 7 to 12. They're two different beasts, really. It's a different approach to the format, and it's a different approach to the comedy, and you really got to look at them as two different beasts. You know, it's never really. It's never become one unwatchable for me, Red Dwarf, really, since from series 7 onwards. I know it has for some people. Hey, you know, like I've said before, it's my favourite programme, so even if it was just the theme tune and then a bowl of shit in a microwave for half an hour, I'd still watch it. So, thoughts on Mechocracy, series 12, episode 4. Yeah, I really enjoyed this episode. I laughed all the way through. It's funny, this has been consistent, I've noticed, at least whilst reviewing Red Dwarf and doing these videos that my favourite episodes never seem to be the ones that the creators think are the strongest. I think the tendency is with Red Dwarf to put to that series that episodes 1 to 3 usually are the strongest, and they put the weaker ones towards the end. But actually, my favourite episodes always tend to come in the latter half of the series, in all series, and this one I really liked. I thought it was. The performance, the cast aren't as strong as they were, but this had several, at least 6 or 7 moments where I laughed out loud, and this was. A character building episode, or a less, well, maybe not. It was a less strong sci-fi concept than the other episodes. It was. I thought it might be a character episode, or at least a single setting episode early on, where they're in the drive room and Rimmer's having his promote and demote list a debacle. But no, the plot is that the mechanical machines on Red Dwarf are infected with a virus which makes them think for themselves. So they go on strike, and then the bulk of the episode is a presidential campaign between Crichton and Rimmer over who will be the presidents, the electoral representative to represent the machines. And yeah, there's some really fun moments. I think the comedy moments in this have hit to a greater extent than they have in any of the other episodes, which have got more bogged down in the plot and the science fiction of it all. I liked the videos, the presidential elect videos that Rimmer and Crichton make. I liked the little nods back to previous series. There is, because within the videos they put clips from older seasons in there to smear their opponents. Just really funny expressions from Chris Berry. And of course, I loved the return of Talkie Toaster. Essentially doing a repeat of the Talkie Toaster scene from series 4, but they got David Ross back. I was listening for a second thinking, is that David Ross? Yes, it's definitely him. And I love, and so I love to see him back. Again, it was we all know buns, baps, baguettes and bagels, so you're a donut man, or however they phrased it this time around. But that was it put a smile on my face as a fan. I think if you're unused to the show, you might be a bit bewildered about what was that bit with the toaster all about. But as a fan, it was I dug it. So I enjoyed Mechocracy. So join me for my next video. I'll be reviewing Series 8. I'm going to wrap this one up here. It was longer than I expected. So until then, folks, this is me, Big Buddha, signing off, and I shall see everyone out there in YouTube land.